feeling a little nervous, that you should just look out there and just picture them all naked. But I don't know about you. Hopefully you don't feel naked. I feel naked because I walked out of my home this morning without my cell phone, and I feel absolutely lost. And is that not a statement? Does everyone else, when you do that, do not feel the same way? It is a modern age, so excuse me for being somewhat underdressed this morning. Anyway, my name is Woody Kingman, class of '78, and I am honored to represent the Blake Alumni Board, which sponsors these breakfasts at Blake. Today we have a great one with Poppy Harlow, and before we get going, I just want to make a couple of announcements, because we got some great holiday alumni events coming up. Being an old man, the way that I am, I'm politically incorrect, and will tell you that we have the Smoker coming up, which will be Monday, December 22nd at the Northrop campus, officially called the Blake Alumni Holiday Party. Smoker, I think, really tells us what it's all about. Next, the boys' alumni hockey games will be on Friday, December 26th here at Blake, followed the next day by the girls' alumni hockey games. They will be Saturday the 27th, also here at Blake. Details will be in some of the mailings and emails that you'll get from the school. And then in the new year, we'll start Breakfast at Blake on January 15th with parent Joanne Pastel, award-winning author, philanthropist, and advocate for children's health. So I hope we'll have a great Breakfast at Blake session then, and we've got speakers lined up for the whole year. It's going to be a great year with Breakfast at Blake. So now let me turn over the podium to our head of school, native of Seattle, in her second year here at the Blake School, third year here at the, time flies. Dan, podium's all yours.
Good morning. It's wonderful to see such a full group here this morning. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Poppy Harlow as the inaugural recipient of the Young Alumni Award. If there were any doubt that Catherine Julia Harlow was destined for great things, you need only look at the Reflections Yearbook of 2001. Yes, we are going to refer to that. Among an eloquent tribute to her late father and heartfelt thanks to her family and classmates, Poppy quoted a spectrum of important influences on her life. These include singer-songwriter Ben Harper, Annie DeFranco and Dave Matthews, peace activist Yoko Ono, novelist Louisa May Alcott, playwright Tennessee Williams, and French essayist Montaigne. She even included a couple of sentences in French. But lest you think that Poppy Harlow is all erudition all the time, just check out her Twitter profile. And I'm quoting here: made in Minnesota, Brooklyn transplant, Vikings fan forever, love to travel but hate to fly. Retweets are not endorsements. So there you have it, a succinct sense of humor at 140 characters or less. Currently, Poppy is a New York-based correspondent for CNN, reporting on breaking news, features, and investigative stories. Previously, she was the anchor for CNNmoney.com, serving as the primary host for the site's video network. She also served as a business correspondent on CNN, CNN International, and HLN, covering business and economic news and how it impacts policy and people around the globe. She interviews prominent business leaders, policymakers, small business owners, and consumers on a wide range of topics. Poppy Harlow covers major international business events as well, including the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, South by Southwest, the North American International Auto Show, and Fortune's Brainstorm conferences. She has interviewed the heads of the world's largest banks, Warren Buffett, Jay-Z, and countless other luminaries. Poppy's reporting has won numerous industry awards, and these are just a few. They include the Gracie Award for Best Online Investigative Feature on Financial Fraud, and the Society of American Business Editors and Writers Best in Business Award for Online Video. She is a regular speaker at industry events and donates her time to developing emerging high school and collegiate journalists. Born and raised in Minnesota, Poppy graduated cum laude from Blake. She went on to earn distinctions of magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa, along with a bachelor's degree in political science from Columbia University. While Poppy's roots remain firmly in the Minnesota landscape, or Minnesota tundra, her influence is being felt and seen far beyond the snowy climes of the Twin Cities. It is with great pride that the Blake School has played even a small role in her achievements. We honor her today with this citation. For her leadership and significant contributions in raising public awareness on the topics of today through objective and civil discourse, Blake is honored to name Poppy Harlow its 2014 Outstanding Young Alumni of the Year. Congratulations, Poppy.
That's such nice.
This is an engraved silver bowl, which we won't make you hold at the moment.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Welcome to Blake. Anne, nice to meet you. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. Well, you've done more than a little bit to bring me here. I think the reason that I get to do what I get to do is because I was raised in this school from kindergarten throughout. My kindergarten friends, Christine Brooks, Anne here in the back, my great friends from high school, Christina, Melissa Anderson, so many people, my parents-in-law, Slavka Bronco Babsik, my mother, Mary Harlow, thank you for being here, everyone. But Blake was huge, so you did a lot more than just a little. I also think Minnesota was huge. I mean, I moderated a panel at the Walker last night about Minnesota and the identity of our great state and not being called a flyover state ever again. And it was such a good discourse to have, so I could not be more proud to be from here. If you ask any of my producers at work, every time Minnesota is in the news, I make sure to mention how great it is and that I'm from there. They're a little sick of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of business, because a lot of what I do is business reporting. And I'm going to show a few clips of stories, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A at the end, so please have some questions ready. Let me begin with this. So I started at CNN in January 2008, and it was the beginning of the worst financial crisis that I will probably ever see. And you just sink or swim, and you dive in. And my boss said, figure out a way to tell these stories to people that matter. Figure out a way to make Wall Street make sense to everyone else. Because what I saw and what I've seen is how my generation has been affected by it. Millennials, it's harder for us to get jobs. We saw some of our parents lose their homes. We saw their savings depleted. We saw their world change, our world change. And in many ways, we looked at American global businesses differently, right? I mean, many people made perceptions about what corporate America is, what businesses are. But at the same time, I was having a conversation recently with a CEO of one of the biggest banks in the world. And he said to the group he was speaking to, he said, who do you think has done more for the world in general, the Ford Motor Company or the Ford Foundation? And if you think about it, you can make up your mind what you think, but the Ford Foundation wouldn't exist without the Ford Motor Company. And think about how many jobs the Ford Motor Company has created. So it's just a different way to look at business, and just remember, despite the hard times we went through, what business stands for and how important it is, the jobs that businesses create. This is not to say corporate America has done it right all the way through, but I think there is a changing face of business. So that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. I think that my generation, millennials, are demanding something different from companies. I know that we want more than just the cheapest price. I think we want to know where our goods are coming from. One of the panelists last night is the Chief Marketing Officer at Faribault Woolen Mills, which is a great, iconic American company. And I see it in Brooklyn, where I live, and I see it here. People want to know where their products are from and how they're made. And I think increasingly, they want to know what their company stands for, whether they're working for them or buying from them. So a few things. I was down in Bentonville, Arkansas. There's a little company down there named Walmart. And I was interviewing this fascinating woman. Her name is Rosalind Brewer. She is the CEO of Sam's Club. She is the first African-American woman to run any division of Walmart. I think she might be CEO of Walmart one day. And she said, look, we have to change how we're doing things because we want the sought-after millennial. And social media means they're monitoring us every single second of every day, and they want something different. And she's completely right. I was at a panel in New York a few weeks ago, and it was on marketing and global strategy, and the CMO of Bank of America, fascinating woman, Ann Finucane, spoke there. And she said a few things. I'm going to read a few quotes because they really stood out to me coming from, you know, the woman in charge of the perception of one of the biggest banks in the world. She said, after the 2008 financial crisis, banks had to completely revamp their marketing because most people would have rather, this is a quote, gone to the dentist than talked to a financial services company, even without Novocaine. And then she went on to say, we as a bank, we had to become more authentic. We had to be straightforward about what was valuable to people. If it wasn't authentic, we were going to get rejected. She said, what we decided is that if we couldn't prove it, we weren't going to do it. And she said, you have to be good at all of these other things, social responsibility, your product, your level of engagement. On that same panel, a man who lived and worked here in Minnesota actually for a long time, Brad Rencher, he's the SVP of digital marketing for Adobe, also said about us, millennials, he said, the millennials have forced us to recognize that we're no longer owners of our brand, we are stewards of our brand. And I completely believe that. If you are not authentic, if you are not standing for something, then I do not think that you will succeed, large or small, with millennials, which are going to make up 40% of the workforce, I believe, by 2020. A company that I'm actually just going to get a little bit of this water, which I forgot to bring up. But a company that I've covered a lot over the past 6 years is Starbucks. And Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz is someone who talks about a lot more than coffee. If you've tracked that company and tracked that leader, you'll hear him talk about things outside of coffee, frankly, more often than you will about coffee. And every time I interview him, I say to him, are you going to run for president? And he says, no. Are you going to ask me that in every interview? And I say, yes. Because it's rare to hear a CEO of such a big publicly traded company that can move on every word talking about controversial things. But he has clearly made the calculation and the decision that it is worth it for their business, and it's paid off. They've had record profits. So what we've heard Howard Schultz do is come out publicly to support gay marriage. Not the only one. Nike did it, Microsoft did it. But in 2012, he was asked publicly in a shareholder meeting, you know, why do you feel like Starbucks has to take a position on this, right? Because not everyone's going to agree with you. And he said, if you feel respectfully that you can get a higher return than the 38% you got last year, it's a free country, you could sell your shares and buy shares in another company. He chose to take that stance. Not everyone agrees with him, but he felt like that was what he wanted his company to stand for. That was his choice. Guns. Last year, he came out and asked people not to bring guns into Starbucks, even where they're legally allowed to. He really risked alienating, and he did alienate people, but he made the decision that I want to be vocal about what my company stands for. Other people loved it. 2 years ago, he came out and said to his fellow CEOs, to his customers, no more money to political campaigns until Washington gets its fiscal house in order, which they still haven't for the long term. And he said, we cannot continue like this and fund Washington like this. Again, you risk alienating people, but you also say what a lot of people are thinking. Veterans. Starbucks not alone in this at all. Amazing to see Citigroup, Walmart, large companies, small companies hiring veterans and actually having a discourse about it right now. What are we going to do with our men and women returning from service? A few weeks ago, I interviewed Schultz and a Washington Post reporter. They just wrote a book about this. And he said the government has done a better job sending our men and women to war than bringing them home. And he's right. And a lot of companies are realizing this and they're doing something about it. But my point in this is you can agree with it or not. This is just one example of a company realizing that we want to know who they are. We want to know what they stand for. And And that has stuck with me through my reporting. So that is a side of what I do, is CEO interviews and this sort of thing, which I really enjoy. But what I like more is doing stories here in Minnesota, doing stories here in the Midwest. I've reported a lot on Detroit over the past 6 years, and what I think is a city that has really gotten the short end of the stick, and a city that is struggling, but I believe is on the rebound, and is a city made up of amazing people with amazing stories who don't really get to tell them if we don't tell them. So I'm going to play a few clips for you as I watch the time here of a few different stories that I've done, just little clips. I can't play the whole thing, but just to give you a sense of some of the work that we do that I think is most meaningful to me, and is, I think we have a responsibility as journalists, as CNN, to put their stories out there. So Adam has trusted me with the AV. Here we go. So this is one in Tennessee.
A new normal for these young women locked up in East Tennessee. To give you a sense of how bad it is here, people here are more likely to die from overdosing on drugs than they are from homicide or even from car crashes. We're heading into the Cobb County Jail here, and we're going to spend much of tonight with some female inmates. Sheriff, thank you. So, how many women in jail tonight?
Right now, 49.
And how many of them in some way related to prescription drugs?
Guesstimation, probably 95% of them are in there for prescription drugs.
Wow.
Open 6 cell, please.
The women I'm about to meet have been here anywhere from a month to a year and counting. Nice to meet you, Poppy. As soon as we say our hellos, our cameras fog up. The 8 women double bunked in these cramped quarters have all showered. Our toilet, the shower. Yep. So there's 8 bunks in here, but a lot of nights they have 4 or 5 more women that sleep on these mats on the floor, and that's sort of the norm here. It's the reality these days of overcrowding, especially of the female population. What do you call it out there? Yeah, the street. The streets. You want to be in the streets. Yeah. In the streets of Newport, Tennessee, it's the pill trade that's driving crime.
But they have been going down that path.
It's done?
Yeah, they make it out.
So that's a 10-minute piece that we did for a pilot actually at CNN. But, you know, I met these girls and I stayed. One of them was 8 months pregnant, and she got out and she's clean and she's doing better, but the reality is the situation for them isn't a lot better. It's harder to get into drug treatment than it is to get these pills, and that's still the case in Tennessee. So that is a story that impacted me a lot because it's about these people that would never have their stories told and never discussed. And it doesn't solve their problem, but at least we're talking about it. The next video is
GM of faulty ignition switches and then linked to at least 32 deaths, including
Erickson
We've tracking very closely. So this is a
having years before the emails you just heard about, GM was even aware of the ignition problems. His death obviously devastated his family, to say the least. And on top of the grief, his girlfriend, who was driving the car, spent nearly a decade believing that she was in fact responsible for his death. That's because General Motors never told her or Erickson's family that his death had been linked to the ignition switch problem. And now GM isn't doing anything to help Erickson's former girlfriend clear her name. Here's CNN's Poppy Harlow.
For the past 10 years, I have been in a form of prison.
Michael Erickson was Candace Anderson's first love.
I can still hear his laugh, just big laughter.
and Rhonda Erickson's only child.
There's gifts on the wall that he gave me. He's everywhere in this house.
The father of 2 young daughters, Sierra and Savannah.
He'll never walk them down the aisle. He can't go see their ball games and their achievements.
November 15, 2004, everything changed. Candace and her boyfriend Michael are in a major car crash. Candace is behind the wheel and is severely injured. Michael doesn't survive.
I was through the windshield on the hood of the car, and then his face was face down in my lap.
Candace Anderson pleaded guilty to criminal negligent homicide. Only this year, a decade later, she learned it may not have been all her fault.
You were being prosecuted as murder. What do people in this town call you?
I've been told a couple of times, point blank to my face, that I was a murderer, that I killed him.
Candace could not have been prouder the day she bought her brand new 2004 Saturn Ion.
It's this one right here. This is the tree you hit.
Less than 9 months later, it crashed on this East Texas country road.
That was the day that my old life ended.
2 police cars and a neighbor pulled up in my yard. And you kind of know what that is, a mother does. And it's just like the whole world crashes right there.
The police report says neither Candace nor Michael was wearing a seatbelt. The airbags did not deploy.
Do you ever have moments when you think, why did I survive?
Oh yeah, I felt that way the whole 10 years.
After the crash, Xanax was found in Candace's system. She was not prescribed the drug, but says she took 1 pill the night before. The police report says Candace's intoxication resulted in the accident.
I did have a minimal amount of Xanax, that's not a question. Do I think I was intoxicated that day? No, I wasn't intoxicated.
But the authorities disagreed, and she was indicted on a felony charge of intoxicated manslaughter, facing up to 20 years in prison. Later, she pleaded guilty to criminal negligent homicide, a felony, and was sentenced to 5 years probation and fined. But just this year, GM recalled millions of cars for a defective ignition switch, which can suddenly turn the engine off while driving, disabling the airbags, power steering, and anti-lock brakes. Candace's 2004 Saturn Ion was one of those. At least 32 people died as a result, but GM didn't contact Rhonda or Candace.
Was it a fluke that you found out that this is why your son is dead?
Pretty much.
After news of the recalls, Michael's mother contacted the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, who told her that her son is one of those deaths.
You may never have known.
I don't believe I was the one who done.
Did GM ever reach out to you? Did they ever tell you?
I still haven't heard from them.
In fact, as this all dragged on for Candace Anderson, there is proof General Motors saw signs of the problem and didn't fix it. In 2004, the same year as Candace's crash, GM engineers were investigating so that's about a third of it.
Long story. We've been following for Anderson Cooper. It goes through what we found through the Volucas report, 300-plus page report put out that showed what coincided with General Motors investigating the problem year by year as Candace Anderson was prosecuted and her life was falling apart. We had a chance to interview the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, recently and asked her about Candace Anderson's case. And right now, Candace is fighting for a pardon. It's the only way she can get the felony off her record in the state of Texas. And she's in nursing school, but it's very hard to get a job if you have a felony on your record. So this story has meant a lot to me because it has put a human face on a business story, on what has happened with General Motors. And the company is trying to do, everything they can, and I certainly believe that. And a lot of amazing workers and people at the company, and they're doing everything they can to make this right, to fix those cars. The reality is there are a lot of people that have been hurt through this, and we felt like it's really important to make this story human, to make this story resonate. So that's something, and I'll show you one more. I told you about Detroit, and then I'll wrap up and we'll do questions. Detroit is a city that I find amazing and wonderful in so many ways, clearly challenged, but a city that I think we can't forget. This is the home of the American car. This is, one of America's once biggest cities that has fallen on really hard times. So over the last 6 years, we've done a lot of reporting in Detroit, and this is just a sort of real clip of some of the different pieces we've done there. The first one, we simply...
Well, how do you get by in Detroit?
How do I survive in Detroit?
Education.
That's hard to say.
Go to school. Don't be like a person like me out here selling drugs.
Just perseverance and education, going back and getting your education. You have to be persistent in the city to achieve what you want to achieve.
Beer, wine, convenience store. This is what people in low-income neighborhoods have.
Let's see what we could get in here. Oh, do you have any fresh food, any vegetables or fruit or anything?
No, we don't care.
Nothing like that? Do you have any fresh food, any vegetables, any fruit, anything like that? No? Do you have any good grocery stores around here?
No, man. And no fruit, no vegetables.
In a city of abandoned houses, abandoned factories, and abandoned people, a record number of unclaimed bodies piled up at the Wayne County morgue.
This is a freezer.
Their next of kin unable or unwilling to pay for their burial.
And I have to believe that it's because of the economic problems that we're having.
They were stacked up like my shoes in the closet.
Shanti Das, a former Motown music executive, was moved by our first story on Detroit's unclaimed death and decided to do something about it. Her own family had struggled to find the money to bury her father. Right here at the Fox Theater, this is your headquarters. You've stayed in Detroit when so many companies have left. Why?
Detroit, I think, is going to come back. It's going to be known as the greatest urban turnaround in the history of America and perhaps the world.
Really?
Yes, I do. And this is our home. We have pride. We want to do everything that we can to make our home better, improve it, and we're doing that. And we've certainly put our money where our mouth is because we've invested heavily in Detroit.
All right. So that's just a small collection of things that we've done.
Detroit, I agree with him that Detroit is going to be a major turnaround story. But just to wrap up, I think my job and my responsibility is to give a voice to people like that. The favorite story I've still ever done is this one you saw a clip of there that I wasn't in, about how do you survive in Detroit. I talked to all of these people over a number of weeks and just asked them a simple question: how do you make it? And it's not easy, but you heard repeated education, education, education. Also, someone that I've interviewed, had the honor to get to know and interview a lot, is Warren Buffett, and he talks a lot about the ovarian lottery and being really lucky with where he was born. And I won the ovarian lottery. We all won the ovarian lottery. We are here because of it, in large part. But when you talk to him about philanthropy and why he chooses to help who he helps, he said, it's basically the people that got the short end of the stick, to benefit others who, through the luck of the draw, he said, quote, have received the short straws in life. So I think bottom line, we received a really long straw, and I got really lucky growing up here, and really lucky with my parents, and really lucky at this school, and really lucky to get a job at CNN. So I think we have to tell these stories. So I'm happy that I get to, and proud that I get to, and that's pretty much it. So thanks for having me.
Poppy, I'm sure some folks have some questions for you.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Anyone?
Yes.
First.
Or I'm gonna let you.
You're in charge. You're on your own.
Okay.
You're the professional. I'm just.
Hey, if you want to introduce yourself, I'd love to know who you are.
I
I thought it was going to get testy in here for a minute. Oh, I asked.
Loss of those jobs. Is there already?
So two answers to that. The question was an example of driverless cars, how that is changing things, and if it's safe. I don't know. I think, but you know, it will be. It will be when they hit the road. But also the loss of jobs, right? I mean, what happens to Detroit when you have driverless cars, right? Well, it still takes as many people to make them, but does it change the industry? Right? Sure. So two answers to that question. I think the first is, I talked to Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, about the driverless car, which GM says is 2 years away, the first stage, which is incredible. They're making really incredible progress on that. I think this is a new economy. I think this is a more skilled labor economy. I think I asked Warren Buffett about this in an interview where I asked him about minimum wage, because I expected, with his liberal politics generally, that he would say, yes, the federal minimum wage should be raised. It should be $10.10 an hour, in line with what President Obama wants. But he didn't. He said, actually, Poppy, that is the hardest question I haven't been able to answer for 50 years, if minimum wage should go up, because the economics of it tell you that when it does go to a certain point, you lose jobs. But what he did tell me is, I'm not worried about the fact that technology is changing the landscape and jobs. He said, you know, a few decades ago, we were an agriculture-based economy, you know, and we were able to transition from that. It's just a painful transition, and that's what we're going through. I mean, we were talking about it in the panel last night at the Walker. Minnesota has the biggest 3D printing company in America. They're printing cars. They own MakerBot. Who knew? That's amazing. These are just different jobs, and it takes different education and different skills. CNN is airing a documentary tonight called The Ivory Tower, if you want to watch, about college. And if college, as we know it, is worth it in this way, or if the education needs to change. So a long answer to your question is, I believe that it's going to change the landscape. I believe it's going to be painful, but I believe it's going to be okay. It's just going to be different jobs and different training, and it's not going to be easy to get there. Totally scary. I agree. Yes, right here.
We spend a lot of money talking about healthcare and working on it, and it's treated as a supply and a demand situation. Right now, if we could have people be healthier through what we call the social determinants of health, how this cancer, jobs, education, food, etc., then we wouldn't need so much healthcare. We don't have the people to take care of us, we don't have the money to take care of us in the future. How do we shift the conversation from health care, which takes 88% of our money in those accounts and 10% of our outcomes, to those social determinants of health accounts for 40%, which would be your individual choice for policy. Better place to walk, so I walk.
Okay, so she's asking about how to fix the healthcare system. Okay, I don't have a total answer, but I think how to change, talk about it. That's not covered in the news, is it? I'll work on that. We'll work on that. You're right. I mean, it can't just be complaining or being an advocate of Obamacare or fighting over it or shutting the government down. It has to be talking about things that could fix it, and that's a very, very important point. I didn't know those statistics, and I'll bring them back and talk to, please. You can email me, poppy.harlow@turner, like tedturner.com. Yes, in the back here.
Hey, Poppy, you might remember me as the 17-year-old.
Hi, Nick. How's it going?
So I gave my senior speech on why I joined the Marine Corps, and I now went to Iraq twice, became an officer, but now I work in veterans employment, and you happen to speak about it. So at your level, what do you see? Do you see the business leaders like Howard Schultz, who is an amazing advocate, or do you see the politicians using it as a platform to promote their message? So is this genuine, or is this something to kind of further their own interests?
Thank you for your service. First. I believe it. I'm still Minnesota optimistic. I don't think that there is some cynical sort of self-betterment goal here on the sides of politicians or business leaders. I think it's twofold. I think, one, they realize that if you don't put these people to work, they're going to be dependent on a system. I think that's realistic and smart. I think, two, there is a real realization that people coming back from these wars are being, perceived differently than perhaps returning from World War II. and that they have these incredible skills. I mean, I did a story on a veteran. There's this amazing program called the Entrepreneurship Boot Camp for Veterans at Syracuse University. We profiled it. 60 Minutes did a big profile on it. James Haney runs it, and they believe that veterans are perfect entrepreneurs. I mean, they know how to lead. They are individual. They are driven. They are goal-oriented. They execute. That's what you need from an entrepreneur, so it trains them for that. So I'm a big believer in programs like that. What I worry about is how do you keep the momentum going? Everyone, and I asked this to Howard Schultz. I mean, he just wrote a book on it. All the big companies are talking about it, and you've seen a lot of hiring commitments from all of these big companies. And even smaller companies. There's a flip-flop company in New York that is hiring veterans, and these are young 20-something entrepreneurs. But I just worry about the momentum. And I worry about when we stop talking about it in a few years, and I worry about when it isn't the in thing to do. So I think that's going to be up to people like you and me to hold these businesses accountable. Maybe we should go back in 5 years and do a story on what veterans they hired, what jobs they have. It's not just enough to give them the entry-level jobs. They have to have a path to growth where they can support their families. So what really has happened, and that's frankly on the media, it's on the government who's funded some of these programs, and it's on all of us to keep an eye on that. But I'm optimistic. I'm really happy to see that it's happening. We have one more, two more questions right back there. Yeah, and you can't cover everything you want to cover. I mean, sometimes my editors say no. It's the reality. I push very hard, and I hear about them, I read about them. I'm looking into a story right now on child tobacco farmers in Tennessee. Children are working on these tobacco farms, and from what I've heard, I'm just doing preliminary research, and some of them are getting very ill from the tobacco plants penetrating through their skin, but there's no laws to, because in agriculture you can work really at any young age. So that's a story I really want to do. So I make the calls, put together a pitch, and then I go to the different shows. Like with Anderson's show, I went to his team for this GM story when I started hearing about this woman and what happened to her, and I took it to their team, and I was hoping they would sign on because they're a great platform for long pieces like that, and they said, yes, we want it. But sometimes I try to sell it to 10 different shows and they don't want it. I just got back from Haiti last week where I'm doing a story on this amazing man called Josue La Jeunesse. He's a janitor and a taxi driver at Princeton University. He's born in Haiti. He immigrated here, and he, after the earthquake, he went back to his town right near Port-au-Prince and saw the destruction, but also they had never had running water, ever. They had to hike 2 miles up a mountain to get fresh water every day. And he said, I'm going to finally do something about this. Long story short, he has created, with the work of a nonprofit, water for the entire town, running water for 5,000 people. They made a documentary about him. He's this amazing guy. So we went back to profile him to air in January on the 5-year anniversary of the earthquake, this January 12th. And the shows, I pitched it to some of the shows, and they were like, I don't know. So we pitched it to CNN.com, digital. And they said, yeah, great, we want it. Go do it. So that's also, just thinking about it's not just about television anymore. It's about digital and where people get their stories as well. So, I just hear about stories from people on planes. I read about them, and I do the research and send them out. Okay, I think time for one more question. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, right there, very quickly. Yeah.
Chris Walsh, class of '80.
Hi.
I'm a lawyer, and I often cross-examine people for hours during depositions. So
I do that in interviews sometimes.
Yeah. Things in common. I haven't seen your work report today, so I really respect and appreciate your optimism, and that you ask some positive questions that give people hope, and your stories have hope. But how do you balance that with also being an investigative journalist, asking tough questions? Like, for example, I was thinking on the Starbucks CEO, recently on Facebook, I saw a lot of criticism that Starbucks is part of this grocery manufacturers lawsuit relating to GMO products. Mm-hmm. And I'll sit down and...
No, I write about that this week. So I'm interviewing Howard Schultz December 4th, so I'll be asking him about that. You ask, do I have time to show 2 more minutes of something? Just in response to that, if I can.
I will just say, it is 8:30. If some of you have to leave, by all means, feel free. But having said that,
Yeah.
People have more questions, we'll just carry on as well. Go ahead and click on it. Feel free if you have to take on.
Okay, so I'm going to have him open this, but it's a really good question because you have to always balance. I'm going to show you this clip and then I'll tell you about it.
Appropriate for me to do. I don't have all the facts in my head.
You know, with all due respect, that answer really is unworthy of GM. I hope you'll think more about it. Because this is a young woman whose life has really been changed as a result of a perversion of the justice process. As a result of GM knowing and concealing that she was innocent.
Now, even the former district attorney who prosecuted Anderson is fighting for her. In a letter recommending a full pardon, she writes, "It is my opinion that no action or omission of Miss Anderson was the cause of the accident." She also writes, if she had all the evidence from General Motors, she would have stopped the prosecution.
Last month, GM CEO Mary Barra reiterated to CNN that it is not her place to step in.
Do you believe Candace Anderson should be pardoned? That is something for the courts to decide, not for General Motors. There, I think, are the right experts that have the full, complete details. Those are the people who should be making that decision.
You don't think GM should weigh in at all?
I do not.
Looking back, do you think someone at GM should have, when they saw this happen and there was an internal investigation, reached out to Candace Anderson?
As you look across this, we have making the right changes that we need to make with the learnings that we've had from the Lucas report. We're working to make sure we're the industry leaders in safety as we move forward, and we've taken steps to do the right thing.
So that's part of a long interview that Mary Barra. There was just a few minutes. It was a, you have to ask those tough questions, and it got tougher than that. But that's our job. And that's our responsibility. And someone once said to me, if you please everyone, you're not doing your job right. So that's been a really hard realization for me just in life, that I'm not going to make everyone happy. And you may do some of these interviews and never get access to that person again.
So you're saying
but you can't
be Minnesota nice.
You have to strike a balance, and you have to decide when the public interest always outweighs your access to someone. And, you have to ask them all sorts of questions. With Howard Schultz, someone I've covered a lot, I ask all sorts of different questions. His PR team never asks me what I'm going to ask him, which I would not tell them anyways. But some PR companies do that. And there are a lot of CEOs, they appreciate being asked the challenging questions and being given an opportunity to address them. But you're right, you always have to ask them and you have to push them, and if they're not answering you, you have to ask them again. And that's why we're employed, and that's our responsibility.
Any last questions? Go ahead, Mr. Bean.
This whole thing about Michael Brown
In Ferguson?
Yeah. To me, it seems a classic situation where nobody knows what happened, but they're all geared up to fight about it. Can the media do something to be more informative, or to back off and say, we're not covering either side yet until we know the facts? Is that a possibility?
So it's a great question. This story might break this weekend when I'm anchoring on Saturday and Sunday night, or at least we're preparing for a grand jury decision that could possibly come down this weekend. I think about that a lot. I think about, am I inciting this? Are we inciting this? But the reality is, it's the news, and it's what's happening in that town, and it's a reflection of racial tension there for decades. So I think we can do it in a responsible way. I try to do it in a responsible way in terms of the guests that we book, the amount of airtime I give them. It's my responsibility to push back on someone. But I know what you're saying, and maybe the protests wouldn't be as big if we weren't airing them. But that's not my call to make. And that's not, I think the role of the media is to, in a responsible way, cover what is happening on the ground. And again, like I was saying, be a platform for the voiceless. You can call someone out if they come on the show and they're being absurd or making remarks to, you know, ignite the situation. And you can not have them on again. And I think that is what we need to do. It's not okay to just have people on because you think they're going to rate well. That's not okay. And it happens in television. I'm proud of CNN. I think we try hard not to do that. But I think it's a really tough line, and I really appreciate the question because it's a line that I try to walk, and I'm going to have to walk maybe this weekend.
See, Poppy, one last question, because I get to control it.
Look who's really in charge.
Exactly.
The president's going to give a speech. Three networks have decided not to do it. Facebook made the announcement this week. We talked about not necessarily the politics of the topic, but the politics of the coverage and why Facebook, why the three major networks are carrying the president's speech.
And what did Facebook do?
He announced his speech.
Right, tonight on immigration.
Announced it on Facebook.
Right.
As opposed to.
Well, well, gets at his base, right? I mean, talk about young people, that's where they are. That's where they're getting their news. There, The Daily Show, CNN.com, online, it's not traditional television. So I'm not totally surprised he made the announcement there.
What about the networks not there?
I don't know how to answer that. I think it's I don't know what's behind their decision not to carry it. I mean, people can watch it on cable, right? They can watch it online. Did they give a reason why they're not doing it? I don't know. I'd have to. Yeah. Oh, no. It's a great question. I don't know. You know, it is a business too. It is a business, and if it is a ratings decision, it is a business. You can watch it on CNN. We'll talk about that.
What a fabulous, fabulous presentation. Thank you ever so much, Poppy. That was great. Our very first Young Alumni Award recipient, and certainly it's well deserved. We have some fun alumni events coming up through the holiday season. Hope you'll join us at the alumni party, a couple of hockey games, and all have a great Thanksgiving, a great holiday. We'll see you back here at breakfast.